Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
A very good evening to you. You are watching Biz1st in Focus. I'm sure you watching us from home found it difficult to get to work this morning and to get back home after work as a result of the heavy traffic that is reported in and around Colombo. Is this a problem of the commuters, or is this a national problem? We're not going to merely talk to you about the traffic problems around the country. We are going to talk to you about the transport sector of our country and how it should develop in the coming years. We're going to talk to Professor Amal Kumarage, who is an expert in the transport sector. He has been working in the Ministry of Transport for many years, for 20 years if I'm not mistaken, and held many positions, and he was also at one point the chairman of the National Transport Commission as well, and he's a consultant to the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank for matters that are ongoing. Thank you very much, sir, for being here with us in the studio this evening.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We'll get to this topic straight away. Now, Professor, we know that the government lacks policies in certain areas. We know that the government does not have a trade policy. We saw this when the EDCA issue came up. Various trade unions and various people came up with this problem. When it comes to the transport sector, do you think the government has a clear vision, a clear policy?
Well, if we had, we wouldn't be here talking about the problems. I think if there's any one policy, it's not to have a policy. We have had documents from time to time that sets out what should happen. But what we lack more than a policy is the policy implementing mechanism. I think policies have changed from time to time, as they should, when the economic conditions change, the political scenario changes, and we've had various, state ownership, private ownership, and so on, regulation, deregulation. The sector has gone through many changes from time to time. But what we see is it's not so much the policy perspective, but the implementation of those into delivery that is the weakest link in this.
Now, Professor, we know that even people like yourself are working for these various ministries, people who have a lot of experience, people who have a lot of education under them, people who have a lot of talent are working at various ministries. But when it comes to the actual outcome of things, we see that the outcome is null or zero, or there is some form of corruption that takes place and everything comes to a halt. Why do you think this happens?
Yes, I think, I mean, if I recount my experience in the Ministry of Transport, after my doctoral studies in Canada, I came back in 1990, rejoined the university, and from about 1993, I have been involved with various ministries, chiefly the Ministry of Transport. Over the last 24 years, this Ministry of Transport has had 14 changes of ministers. Okay, now that's bad enough. We've had, I think, 18 or 19 changes of secretaries, because every time the minister changes, the secretary also changes, and sometimes in between they retire, get transferred, etc. Now, with every change of minister, the chairman of all corporations also get changed. The entire board gets reconstituted. So this is chiefly the problem, why no policy continuity is there. It all becomes people learning, trying new things, getting new people involved, and there is discontinuity of any program. I have proposed many initiatives from time to time, only to have them disrupted and being asked to come back, take it forward, that gets stopped again. So I think this is, and that's not only my experience, several people have had. So that is one extreme situation. You take the other extreme of the Ministry of Highways, where from the year 2000 up till 2015, we had one minister who then went on to become the Prime Minister and the President of the country and held the ministry portfolio. Now, there are many things happened, okay? But then we saw the issue of checks and balances and transparency, and many issues have come from there. A lot of money was spent, but again, we are here because that didn't solve the problem, even though money was spent.
Yeah.
So we have both these extremes, but in between, where there is policy continuity, where professionals are there, administrators there's institutional memory, and ministers may come and go, but the policies and the programs continue because they have good objectives and they have outcomes that the nation requires. That
now,
does not happen.
Yeah, Professor, now when it situations in the past, we know that even the previous government, when it was in power, we saw various infrastructure projects being implemented. Even the Katnaik Expressway was done during, even though it was a plan way before this government, it was actually done during the former government. Now my question to you is, yes, we saw infrastructure development during the previous regime, and we said, yes, exorbitant amounts have been spent, various amounts of corruption happened, but the people actually have something to travel on. But when it comes to the situation now, we see that the Central Expressway is taking place, the progress of it is slow, and there is corruption also involved. So this is becoming, even it's going from bad to worse, and we do not have an outcome as well. Why does this keep happening?
Yeah, I need to correct you on one point there, and that is you're referring to the two completed expressway projects, the Southern Highway and the Katnaik Expressway. The Southern Highway was planned over 15 years or so. I myself got involved in several instances, and the ADB, JICA, they all got involved, came in and funded, and it was completed in the early part of say the 2000, somewhere, you know, in the from there to 2010, and but there was at least 10 years of planning before that. So expressways in particular, because there is a lot of money going in, have to be planned in that time frame.
Planned properly.
Properly. Now what has happened to the Central Expressway is that plans have kept on changing. Traces have kept on changing, not only during this government, even during the previous government. There is still no proper feasibility study for the entire trace that is being looked at now. So when these basic studies are not properly constituted, then you have problems. People ask questions for which there are no answers, and people protest, and then you can't say this is the best trace, right? And this is what we are saying.
Now when it comes to, because we are talking about the Central Expressway, now we mentioned how JICA came in, how the ADB came in at previous occasions. Now when someone comes in to fund these projects, in your experience, do they have a say in how the construction work takes place, or what the bidder has to do, or you know what I mean? Do you think that the company who's providing the loans will come and say, look, this is what you have to do in terms of finding the contractor, this is what you have to construct? Do you think that that happens?
Well, it can happen. It can happen. It partly depends on the kind of financing agreement you have. You have multilateral donors who may not have such stringent conditions, but bilateral trade always says it has to go to a contractor in our country and so on. So getting into a situation like that invariably may not be the best solution for us. If we can go for competitive bids, do that from a position of strength where it is client driven, not donor driven, or any other contractor driven, supplier driven. Now these can happen when a government is not watchful, when a government is weak and has to get money somehow, and we've seen that happening from time to time. But if we are in control. Now if you go to India, they actually do all their studies beforehand, before an investor even appears on the table. So such people have no room to come and say, this is wrong, or it should be done this way, or we need to do another feasibility study. It's all done in-house and prepared, and investors have to look at that and decide whether they are going to fund it or not. So we need to get our planning mechanisms, our negotiating mechanisms up to that level, so that we are in control of the planning process and the implementation process, and the finances come and provide the finance.
Are we in control of the planning process when it comes to these mega projects that are done in the country in terms of the transport sector? We are going to find out after this short commercial break. Stay with Biz First in Focus. Welcome back to the show. You are watching Biz First in Focus. We are in discussion with Professor Amar Kumarage about the transport sector in our country. Now, Professor, I'll start off from where we finished earlier, where we stopped earlier. Now, this Central Expressway has been the center of controversy in the past few months, solely because, as you said, the proper feasibility studies have not been carried out, and there were various protests from the area residents, so on and so forth. My question to you is very simple. When this government came into power, they said, look, the previous government has done this, lots of money has been spent, but is this the actual requirement of the country? Are the expressways in our country, are they an actual requirement to our country?
I mean, expressways are required for a country. Only question is when, where, and at what cost. I think these are the things that we know. We also have to look at the wider issue that we have a transport problem, first and foremost. People need mobility. Goods need to get from production areas to factories, from factories to markets, to ports, etc. That's what keeps the economy moving. People have to come to work and get back and do that. Expressways are not necessarily doing all of that. It helps people go on holidays, and it helps people go visit their folk in the village and things like that. Important. But from a point of view of our economic delivery, I think they have bigger transportation issues, yes. Right? Getting about in the city, getting to work, I mean, these are issues. So, in terms of the transportation plan that was done by the University of Moratuwa in 2015, we felt that since we have not been able to improve the transportation infrastructure over a period of time, there was a crisis situation. There still is. And in order to overcome the crisis, what was recommended in the report is that we actually pick the low-hanging fruits. 50% of the people are on buses now. And the buses, chaotic as they may be, are the cheapest and the easiest and the fastest to fix. But no political party in the last 40 years have actually taken steps to attempt that. It is politically a hot potato. But if we did that in 2015, again, I don't think we need to talk about it today.
Definitely.
We are beginning to do a few things like the bus priority lanes and the bus reform. The Sahasara project is now on the table. It's moving, hopefully, and that might show results within the next year or two to easing congestion. But anyway, until then, I really don't think we have much choice.
Professor, you were in the Sri Lanka Transport Board as well at one point. The chairman, if I'm not mistaken.
Acting chairman.
Acting chairman.
Time, yeah.
Now, during that period, we saw in the previous government how air-conditioned buses were introduced for SLTB buses, and people actually had to pay more, but there was the response for it was actually good. In this government, do you know of any plans to actually go forward like that to actually improve the level of public transport in terms of the SLTB?
Yes. Now, the reason why those initiatives did not continue was that there was no real commitment to reform the bus sector. You just buy some, high-end buses and put it on the road. The bus is not the only problem. The traffic is a problem. You need to have buses on time and all of that. So today, those buses haven't really increased in number, and they have not become
the
natural growth has not happened. Now, under this reform, for example, the bus priority lane project, this year what we are hoping is actually to put better buses on the lane as well. The lane is there, it's working fairly well, and now we need to actually start on the rolling stock. And then on the operations, put in GPSs and get a control center, operating them on time, having good customer linkages and feedback. So then only the product is complete.
Definitely.
Then only people will say, this is a product I want. Then only we have a viable solution to get people out of the cars into public transport. So that is what will take a year, maybe two. And if we did start in 2015, we would have been at least halfway there. So yes, this government does have a plan. I think it is the only plan that will give any results before 2020. The other projects are long-term projects which need to be done, but then that is not going to solve the immediate problems this economy is facing of actually kick-starting and improving the efficiency of our economy in the short term.
In terms of the traffic congestions that is reported day by day, I think everyone who is watching us and even yourself will agree that it's going from bad to worse every day.
Yes.
If we take 20 minutes to come to work today, tomorrow it will be 25. The day after it will be 30 and it will keep on increasing. Now, we don't want ourselves in a situation where, like in India, we have to stay in traffic for about 1 or 2 hours. Here, the situation seems to be increasing, but there seems to be some mechanism in place to actually sometimes stop it. May it be the police or may it be the drivers actually thinking and doing, let's use alternative routes. Something is happening and you see a reduction sometimes in Colombo. But as a government, now we see that flyovers are being constructed. The road system as a whole, should there be a restructuring process there as well?
Yes, but there's not much we can do. Already 10% of our land area in the country is used for roads, and there's a limit to what we can do, and that is partly why we are getting protests, because I mean land is precious, you know, from a personal and even from a national point of view. So we need to first see how we can use the land that is already used for roads better. Right. In other words, improve the efficiency of the roads we already have. So we need to manage our roads better. A lot of road space is going by ad hoc parking, okay, you know, utilization at junctions, the management of junctions and discipline also contributes to this, actually reduces the capacity of the roads we have by about 30%. If we actually do that, at least immediately we will get some relief. That's A. Secondly, even the road space we have, we must ensure that more people are able to travel. Our mentality is that more vehicles have to travel, right? Now, a country like Singapore currently has 67% of its people moving around in public transport. And that's a very, very wealthy country. Hong Kong, same. Korea is moving there. And they want to make it 75% in another 10 years' time. Okay. Now, we were 75%, 80% 20 years ago, and we are gradually losing it. We are unable to keep people in public transport. If you go to Europe, people may have 1, 2 vehicles at home, but they'll choose to go to work by train or by bus. You know, that is the choice, attractiveness we need to get our public transport to. For the last 40 years or even 70 years, I would say, public transport has seen as a poor man's transport, and transport solutions have been seen as, okay, get out of that, buy your car, put it on the road. Sri Lanka has a capacity as to how much we can do, and we are seeing that. So that policy has been there, an implicit policy that has to change. And to say, no, people can own a car, they should own a car, but where you use it, at what time you use it, we have to have instruments where we are influencing that. Not everybody who has a car should be encouraged to drive it into Colombo. I mean, London, you have a huge congestion charge, almost a penalty, or you're punished for if you bring the car to places like that. We have no option. If we want people to own vehicles, we have to have mechanisms where we prevent people from bringing in and basically clogging the system.
With that, we go into another short commercial break. You are watching Biz1st in Focus. Stay with us. We are going to talk to Professor Kumarage on more of the transport sector. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. We are in discussion with Professor Kumarage about the transport sector in the country. So, Professor, now we spoke about the traffic situation in the country and what the government can do. In terms of constructing flyovers at these critical junctions, we see a few, we see one coming up in Rajagiriya. Is that a solution?
Every solution, I think, will have a cost to it and a degree of effectiveness. Now, in both those, I think that is not a priority. We have other means of improving such congestion hotspots, at much lower cost.
Like what, if I may ask?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me take the case of, say, the Dehiwala flyover. You know, now all it has done is taken the traffic from Dehiwala to the next junction. Okay, and this is what happens. You can't simply treat one junction because we have a system failure. You know, and it just take then even the one-way systems that we've seen. What it does, it actually it frees the flow in one area but moves the congestion to other areas. So from that point of view, we will make Rajagiriya look better, right? That is, at least traffic-wise, aesthetically, I don't know. But most probably other areas around there are going to get more congested. Maybe the downstream junctions like the Devi Balika junction or the HSBC junction are going to get more congested. We have to wait and see on that. Now, flyovers in general are not encouraged in cities unless you have a last recourse. Now the bus priority lane is also being tried out there fairly successfully, and I think if you really want to make traffic move, we need to move at least 10%, 20% of the vehicles to buses, and that is what will make everybody travel faster at a much cheaper choice. So that's why I said that these are, they may not be as fanciful as, seeing this 4 billion rupee flyover there, right? But in terms of effectiveness, that is what has happened. I mean, if you go to many countries that have actually overcome traffic congestion, sustained it, you don't find flyovers. You have public transport solutions, high quality train services, good bus services, good integration, integrated ticketing, passenger information, where even if I have a car, I will feel, come on, I can take the bus. Why not? I can, use my laptop, I can, I mean, that's time saved rather than fighting traffic, trying to find a place to park, leave aside the cost side. So that is where many countries are introducing smart transport, and the private vehicle is good to own, but there are places that it can be used, there are places that we shouldn't use it, and we need to get there.
In terms of the traffic, I think the three-wheelers also contribute to it, and there are about 500 three-wheelers roaming the Colombo city limits at every given time, and there are about 1.2 million three-wheel owners. So that problem is also a problem, and people find it easy to travel through three-wheelers rather than actually using the buses. So when it comes to that situation, is it a problem for the transport sector?
Yeah, definitely. See, I mean, these are what we call feeder modes. These are the ones that should bring me from my home to the main bus routes or the railway station. But today, I mean, we are using it for door-to-door, and that is not a safe vehicle, it is not environmentally appropriate vehicle, and also on the road. The roads are not designed for them, and that you can see it. So basically, we need to get this ecosystem right. The longer trip should be on rail, the medium distance trip should be on bus, and the short distances should be by three-wheelers or taxis that are feeding, and that is the integration that we need to get in this public transportation. So these are the things that have been on the table for a while, but have been ignored in favor of these more fancy projects like expressways and flyovers, which capture the public imagination. It has from independence, many politicians found, the promise of building roads the most lucrative promise to make, and it worked. It kept on working. Rural roads, tarred roads, asphalt roads, concrete roads, and now expressways. It has never failed to deliver the vote, but it has not solved the problem. It has only made it worse. So from the side of the people also, we need to gradually realize that that is not the way to go. We need to turn back to something we had. In 1950s, Colombo had one of the best transport systems in all of Asia, second to cities in Japan. We've gone downhill from there. It's all talking about things we had once upon a time.
Yeah.
So we've gone after a false dream. It's time to wake up for us to know, it's not too late. We still have 50% of the people on buses and trains. If you go down to 20%, it's going to be impossible. So these are critical years, the golden years that we have to turn back the clock.
Thank you very much, Professor, for being here with us on the show. It was interesting talking to you. I hope we'll see you on more of our programs in the future as well. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for hosting me, Chaturanga.
We have to wake up from the dream, and we have to realize that dream and to become that good country that all of us here and all of us who are watching us want it to be. Thank you very much for watching. That's all we have from the Biz1st program. We'll join you next week with an interesting guest as well. Thank you.